if you ever tell anyone about the things I have done to you, I will find you and I will kill you. I was abused sexually by her boyfriend till I was 9 years old, and it almost happened quite frequently.
Children under the protection of the Alberta Children's Services have suffered for decades. Even more devastating, the 741 children who died in the system over a 14-year period, according to statistics released by the former Progressive Conservative government in 2014. 741 children, a grim average of 53 kids dying every year. One child died every week, one life lost. And in 2017-2018, not much better news. 33 children died under their protection. Alberta Children's Services undoubtedly failed these youth. But those numbers do not capture the children who have been mentally, physically, and sexually abused. Children like Stephen Morin.
When I was about 4 years old, my mom, something happened in my home with me and my sibling, and it caused my mom to go through a lot of grief, and she had to give me up to, she had to call child welfare and tell them she couldn't handle me anymore. And I understand that now. She wasn't ready for the amount of children that she had at the time, which was only 4 or 3, but still yet, she wasn't ready for me. And that's okay, because I have to understand.
Morin is from Enoch Cree Nation, just west of Edmonton. He became a permanent ward of the province 2 decades ago. And he had a new foster mother at just 4 years old. It didn't take long for the abuse to start.
I was abused sexually by her boyfriend till I was 9 years old, and it almost happened quite frequently, almost every week. But she was okay. She didn't know, but I know her to this day. She's a good lady.
After he began to act out, he was moved from that home. But not before his abuser warned him to keep his mouth shut.
The last time I seen him in person, he told me in the shower as he was doing his last whatever you want to call it on me, and after he was done, he told me, and I quote, this will forever be engraved into my memory, and I quote, "If you ever tell anyone about the things I have done to you, I will find you and I will kill you."
Morin then ping-ponged between foster parents and group homes. He told a worker at one of those group homes about the abuse when he was 12.
They ended up getting some, investigators, and nothing was done about it. It was a waste of time. I gave my statements. I was 12 years old. Nothing was done about it. After I left that place, after being there for so many days, going back and forth, they stopped bringing me there, and eventually I was like, that was it.
He says he received no counseling for his trauma. Worse, he felt let down by the system that was supposed to protect him.
I feel like they didn't want it to get out and what happened to me and for many years, and they didn't do their job, and that would come back on them. So what I felt like was that they passed me around to different homes, to make me forget of what happened. And then eventually I went into different group homes after 9 years old, from home to home, school to school. It was crazy, man.
At 16, he left the system. And in his early 20s, he had a big shock when he turned on the TV news one day.
Police are looking for a man who's wanted in connection with a string of sexual assaults. There are 13 outstanding warrants for 53-year-old John Edward Beaver.
It made me cry big time. It made me like, I don't know why I couldn't look away from his photo. I had to look at his photo. I still don't know why I had to look at his photo. But I looked at it, and I always remember like waiting next day, waking up, did they find him yet? You know, listening and everything, they find him yet? And I remember on the 5th or 6th day or something like that, they ended up finding him, and I was like, wow, like the relief.
John Edward Beaver was charged with several counts of sexual assault in 2013. We also found charges going back to the 1990s, including a conviction for possession of child pornography in 1999. There were at least 4 victims in the 2013 case, but he would never stand trial. In August 2014, months before the case began, he died in his sleep while on bail. The province paid Morin $35,000 in 2013.
So there was a lot of big spending when I got that money, and I regret it because I was foolish with it. I just wasn't ready for that amount of money at that time.
1 month after he cashed that check, the money was gone.
In 2015-ish, I really fell off. Not like fell off of anything, but just fell off life. And I went straight downhill. I went through a really bad breakup, and I started using more than just cocaine. I was using meth, I was using heroin, smoking it. I was drinking. I was staying up for 5 days on an average, on a normal basis, 5 days, 5 nights.
I'll go get this done. Oh, beautiful.
Clinton John Marty lives here with his wife, Carrie Lynn. They live on the Elizabeth Métis settlement in Alberta, just south of Cold Lake. Marty and his brother were put into a Catholic home in Edmonton.
I was thrown into at 6 years old with boys as old as 12 years old. And from that day forward, the abuse in the form of sexual, physical, and mental abuse started and continued right up until we left.
That home was supposed to be a stopgap until a foster home was found. Marty was sent to at least 17 homes and group homes. Between each stop, he was placed back into the Catholic home where the abuse continued.
It started out with the boys, other boys. It also was staff. Certain staff members had a fondness for us. The nuns. At 8 years old, there was a sister there. I'm not going to name her name. She may be alive still today. But she would select from some of the older boys to come into her room. They had a single room, much smaller than my camper, with a bed, a nightstand, a sink, and a little closet. And there they would select a boy to go in and have oral sex with them. And once we were done, we were brought back to our bed and told not to say anything.
That performing oral sex on them?
Yes, on the sisters, yes. That was my first experience ever with a female at the age of 9 years old, right? 8, 9 years old.
Marty says one priest abused boys and offered them extra food.
The abuse was reported on many occasions.
Who did you report?
You report it to the social worker. There was 2 of them that were there Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and they were in charge of all of the kids that were in there. And so you tell so-and-so, a staff or a sister, that you wanted to go down and see your social worker. And so you would tell them, and 9 times out of 10 they didn't believe you. They classify you as a troubled kid. We were placed in a receiving home. And in that receiving home, on our last month in care, we were molested by the foster family's son, the oldest son. Physical and sexual abuse. And by this time, I'm almost 12 years old. I'm understanding everything more so that's going on. And you learn to fight back. I learned to fight 12-year-old boys at 8 years old.
Clinton says his mother told Alberta Child Protection not to give him or his brother to his biological father. She did not trust him. They did anyway.
He was one of our abusers. Child welfare was told never to give us to our father, and child welfare placed us with him not once but twice. And he abused us sexually, physically, and very emotionally. And he was charged for that. And he never faced the charges because he committed suicide so that he didn't have to. And so we lived with that as well.
At 12, Clinton and his brother were returned to their mother. That is very rare in cases where the government had a permanent guardianship order.
Our first visit with my mother, my brother and I got into a fight. And we were both very violent towards each other only because of the way things are in the homes. And I kicked my brother in the side of the head, and my mother screams out, "Oh my God, what happened to my boys?" And I can remember clear as day looking at her and saying, "Those boys are gone a long time ago. This is what they created."
Coming up, we'll have more on his story. For victims of child welfare in Alberta, justice is slow.
I started my first case in 1998 against child welfare. And here I am in 2019. And how many people have I gotten compensation for? Maybe a handful.
Moran and Clifford are considering signing up with Edmonton lawyer Robert Lee. He spent his life fighting for victims like them, and has 2 class action lawsuits against the provincial government.
One of the big issues is when a foster parent abuses a child. And there's recent case law from the United Kingdom Supreme Court which says that when a foster parent commits a wrong, whether it's negligence or intentional abuse, that the Child Welfare Department, the government, is legally responsible for whatever the foster parent did. And that is a very important issue that has to be decided, because many of the kids were injured, that have contacted me, were injured, seriously abused by foster parents.
He is hoping to force them to pay the legal fees of victims.
They shouldn't be living in poverty. They shouldn't be living in terrible neighborhoods. They shouldn't be living in circumstances where they have to choose between paying rent or buying food. And so the compensation would allow them to have a little bit of a better life. But more importantly, what everybody tells me is they want the government and child welfare to be held accountable so that this does not happen to any other child in the future.
Lee says the government needs to compensate victims like Stephen Moran and others it failed to protect.
As an elementary school age child, he went and he told the child welfare system, this horrible thing, the most horrible thing that could happen to a child happened to me. And he gets no help. He goes to the system that put him there and says, you did this to me. Now help me. I'm broken. Now fix me. And they do nothing. Ultimately, child welfare is the one that was the guardian of the children. And everyone that I talk to thinks that child welfare should be the one held accountable and responsible for that, because they're the ones that ripped the kids out of their homes, forced them into these foster homes, and failed to supervise them properly. And in many cases, when the kids reported the abuse of the foster parents, were often called liars, or their complaints were just simply ignored. So you have this person telling people in authority the worst possible thing that could happen to a person has happened to them. And as far as Steve knows, nothing really happened. He went to the Zebra unit, he was interviewed, but he doesn't know if criminal charges were laid. He doesn't know if anything happened to those foster parents. And he didn't get any counseling. You know, after that, he ended up on the streets, because after that, are you going to stay in that child welfare system? And so Steve suffers the consequences of their mistakes.
Lee says the current child welfare system is broken, and they are not fixing it.
We need to change the child welfare legal system where they're putting kids in danger, and we need to change the child welfare system, and we need to give these kids compensation. I'm running to the court yelling this at the top of my lungs in legal terms, right? Because you can't yell in court. But in the paperwork, yelling at the top of my lungs, look at what has happened to these children. They have been tortured.
Lee says the situation preys on vulnerable people.
I think it was Gandhi that said that the measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable people. And if that test is true, then our society here in Alberta is very sad and pathetic.
He says he is being fought by the Alberta government's lawyers every step.
And what I thought would take 6 months is probably going to take 2 years. And so my clients can't afford to pay a lawyer. I can't afford to work for free. And that is the dilemma. If you want to go through our legal system, you better have money. And if you don't, and if you've been abused, and if because of your abuse you can't work, and so you don't have money to pay for a lawyer, then you're just out of luck. And that is wrong.
APTN Investigates asked the Alberta government for a response. They told us that Alberta Public Service does not comment on cases before the courts. But Stephen Morin is still looking for answers. He is writing a book on his life.
I wanted to wait till I was at a good point in my life where I'm healed fully enough and I could start writing things on paper and getting it down and not being addicted to drugs or other addictions out there. So at that point I thought it was good to start writing.
Morin says the abuse he suffered will always be a part of him.
Maybe the person I am today, it's either it'll break you or it'll make you. That's simply how it is put. And I've had many moments where it nearly broke me. Like I was on the verge of suicide. Many moments in my life. And it's been years since then. The last moment happened and I'm stronger than ever this year. And I'm on top of the world. Damn right.
He has started a non-profit agency called the Indigenous Children's Mentoring Society. He wants youth to have a mentor similar to the Big Brothers, Big Sisters program. He will start in his home of Enoch.
If we start taking an approach like the Big Brothers, Big Sisters Club did, we could make some serious changes into the lives of children in Indigenous communities, giving them the best of the best. There's nothing bad about having a big brother or a big sister, a role model.
Morin is looking towards his own future, one without any scars.
As the road continues in my life, I'll be able to someday hopefully make that family happen for myself and be the father and the parent I never got to have, and I'll be able to teach my future daughter, our son, the things that I wasn't able to teach: how to tie your shoe, how to teach yourself how to swing on a swing. All these different things that a parent or a big brother or big sister would be, influential in an everyday child's life. And it's just something that I think our communities need.
He is not going to be a victim of his past.
If they were being abused, I would tell them to don't be afraid to fight back. Don't be afraid one bit. Doesn't matter if they're your parents or your sibling, doesn't matter who it is. Don't give up. Don't let them do this to you. Run out of the front door and yell, scream, bloody murder, rape. Don't go back there. Do whatever you can. Flop around. Make them put you in a straitjacket if you have to, if they have to. Don't go back willingly. Don't ever go back to something like that, because you don't deserve that. You deserve to have anything and everything you want in life. and no one can say any different.
For Clinton John Marty, the memories of his abuse would not go away. Marty and his wife Carrie Lynn had 3 daughters and a son. He says he quit drinking when they were young. He wanted to be better than his parents. But he did not reveal his diagnosis of severe childhood post-traumatic stress disorder to any agency. He was scared to.
Because of the fear I had that if I did go seek help, a doctor would say that you're unfit to look after your children. In my mind, that's what might have happened. And my fear of child welfare kept me from seeking help for myself all those years. And so I suffered in silence with my wife by my side for the better part of 17 and a half years now. And continue to suffer, just trying to get some recognition, some claim to what has happened to us, to somebody to step up and say, yes, we were responsible. We were your guardians as outlined by the law, and we let you down. And even today, they're still fighting us. They'll fight us. They can fight us until we're dead and gone. And I believe that's what the government hopes to accomplish.
Marty says he can't hold down a job. He has only completed grade 5.
I've been permanently disabled as a result of this. Unable, yes, I can work. I cannot hold down a 9-to-5 job or a regular job. There are days where I sleep 2.5 hours a night. And it's not by choice. It's not because I have the desire to. When I close my eyes, it's flashbacks. It's nightmares. It's certain scents trigger everything. So I'm unreliable. Without my wife, who's looked after me for all these years, I probably would have been dead a long time ago. Bears.
Now, in his 40s, Clinton Marty is decades past his traumatic childhood. He is trying to live his life.
Who knows what I could have become or what I could have achieved. Had I not had to deal with the reoccurring nightmares, the wondering what I did wrong and why I was treated that way. Well, because my mother loved us enough not to expose us to her problems, she thought it would be best to give us to the government. And a mother's love turned into a child's nightmare.
He says he is proud of how he raised his family and that his kids and grandkids have it better than he did.
To know that I've been with the same woman since I was 16 years old and that we've made a beautiful family together in spite of everything. I know that I've set my children up to never ever have to experience what I went through. To let them know that the things I went through, I sacrificed. I could have brought that upon them, but I didn't. And I did it for my family and to make sure that the cycle breaks. You know, you can't have a repetitive cycle of abuse, alcoholism, drug addiction. It can't continue. And somebody has to be the one to step up and say enough is enough.